very shortly we're going to be going live to Edinburgh, to Bute House, where the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, will be resigning as First Minister of Scotland. We expect her to say that she's going to be hanging around for a while. We heard from Ian McWhirter from the Herald just before the news there that she is likely to hang around for a little while they work out who they're going to appoint as her successor. It's not that clear who it's going to be, who's going to emerge from the Scottish National Party, but certainly a shockwave has hit not only Scotland, but the whole political system here in the UK, because let's not forget, one of the reasons why Keir Starmer decided to get himself all tied up in knots about the issue of trans women and whether a woman can have a penis and all of that nonsense was because he thought he was following Nicola Sturgeon's lead, because he thought that Nicola Sturgeon was actually speaking for entire communities of people, not just women, not just trans women, not just men, not just trans men, not just the LBGTQI plus whatever community, but that she was somehow doing something right. She was seen in many ways as some kind of arbiter of modern politics, in the same way, by the way, as poor old Jacinda Ardern. Remember her, the woman in New Zealand who was being praised as the greatest Prime Minister, you know, since anyone had ever remembered politics. But in fact, it turns out that they all have feet of clay in the end, don't they? They all end up succumbing to their own hype. They all end up finding out what is really the world's view of them. Jacinda Ardern basically came out and said that she didn't have anything left in the tank. So that was why she was going to have to go. The truth of the matter is that during the pandemic, she behaved so disgracefully, telling people not to talk to their neighbours, telling people not to go anywhere, locking down the country, making it impossible for people to even see their relatives or their loved ones for years and years and years. Extraordinary, ridiculous requirements for people to actually move from one house to another, to visit one another, to go out at all. Nicola Sturgeon, similarly, despite what Peter Cardwell said, has become very unpopular in Scotland over the course of the last few weeks, not least because of her backing and her maniacal kind of devotion to this trans rights issue. And she has fallen as a result of that. There is no question in my mind that at the end of the day, Nicola Sturgeon has been taken down, hoist by her own petard, as we would say, and it is the petard of Adam Graham, the rapist, as he was described only recently on Question Time by an SNP politician who couldn't bring herself to call Adam Graham a man, despite the fact that he committed 2 rapes as a man, was charged as a man, went to court and decided he wanted to be a woman in order to be sent to a woman's prison, and changed his name, did not change his sex, did not have any operational procedures done, was still in retention of his male parts, and still, to all intents and purposes, was a bloke. She decided to make that the hill that she would die on, and here she is now about to resign after 8 years of leading Scotland to what she thought was an almost certain vote for yes to independence. But of course, they lost the first referendum, which was said to be the first in a generation. I saw Alex Salmond only a couple of weeks ago, who used to be a very good friend of Nicola Sturgeon's, who was a very good part of the independence movement. They fell out massively together and are now both kind of sworn enemies and daggers drawn. We're hoping to talk to Alex Salmond later on in the show if we can get a hold of him. But he is a man who could now perhaps bounce back despite everything. Because who on earth would you say is going to be the next First Minister of Scotland? Who on earth could be the next First Minister of Scotland, given that nobody really knows who anybody is outside of Nicola Sturgeon? Even I would struggle to think of an MSP that would be worthy of doing what she did, because I used to know Nicola Sturgeon. I've spoken about this before. We used to drink together in a bar in Glasgow called Regano's. And back in those days, it was when Alex Salmond was still the leader of the party, and she was very much his kind of rising star. And she was a very funny, very engaging, very interesting woman. She was obviously a very bright woman. She was trained as a lawyer. She was obviously somebody who cared an awful lot about Scotland. She cared an awful lot about independence. And she was a very affable and interesting person to have dinner with or have a drink with. But somewhere along the line, over the past 2 or 3 years, she kind of lost the plot. She became imbued with her own self-importance. I think that's part of the problem with politics. You know, every single political leader can be certain of one thing and one thing only, and that is that they will, of course, end up with their own demise, looking at them straight in the face. One morning they'll wake up and they'll go, that's it, time's up. I'm afraid there is no more point to it, and nobody wants me here anymore. Everyone is surprised this morning, I think, that this has happened. Nobody's surprised that it would happen, because it always does. Eventually, it always happens. We're looking now at a scene with a Scottish flag, no Union flag, interestingly enough, just a Scottish flag next to a lectern, which has got nobody standing at it. I think it's Bute House, where I've actually been in Edinburgh, and Nicola Sturgeon is about to impart her words of wisdom to an anxious public, I suppose you might say.